world must know that America stands shoulder to shoulder with Israel in its ongoing struggle for security and peace.
The footage behind me purports to be from the wreckage of one of the UN schools the Israeli Defense Forces bombed, with children inside it, in Gaza. Most of the world is not seeing horrifying footage like this, as Israel has forbidden foreign journalists from entering. With Israel's assault in its fourth week, Israel announced a tenuous ceasefire, which was agreed to by Hamas. By the time you see this report, however, the fighting may well have resumed. Israel has justified its assault with a mixture of facts and lies, and like the lies of their U.S. patrons, these lies are paid for with the blood of innocent people. Let's take a look at three arguments used to justify the latest attack on Gaza.
It is unconscionable to expect the Israeli government or any government to sit idly by as deadly rockets rain down on its cities.
The most common argument offered is that Israel is merely responding to a recent round of Qassam rocket attacks by Hamas. This may be the pretext for the assault, but as the Israeli newspaper Haaretz has reported, plans for the assault go back several months. And it was Israel, not Hamas, which broke the 4-month-long ceasefire on November 4th, as was reported in the UK Guardian. Surprisingly, the attack on Gaza may have come not because Hamas was becoming more radical, but just the opposite. As Professor Norman Finkelstein points out, earlier in 2008, Hamas was signaling its willingness to accept the international consensus on Gaza that Israel returned to its June 1967 borders. It was signaling willingness, in other words, to accept peace, a reasonable peace. But Israel couldn't have that. As reported in its April 2008 issue, Vanity Fair uncovered documents showing a conspiracy between the Israelis and the U.S. 2 years earlier to start what it called a, quote, Palestinian civil war, unquote. The goal was to overthrow the democratically elected Hamas government. But the plan failed. In fact, the article argues, the failed U.S.-Israeli plan strengthened Hamas, which then undertook a bloody coup against Fatah in Gaza in response to the U.S.-Israeli attempt at overthrowing them. In sum, then, the U.S. had pushed for Palestinian elections, and when the results were not what it wanted, engaged in a covert action to overthrow Hamas. Now, this style of short-term goal politics in the region is, of course, nothing new. When Yasser Arafat and Fatah were seen as the greatest threat to Israeli hegemony, Israel supported Hamas for many years in the 80s and 90s.
Unlike the indiscriminate rocket attacks launched by Hamas, Israel's precision strikes are a defensive last resort necessary to protect her people.
The second argument is that Israel is only aiming for military targets in Gaza. Israel shells Gaza with artillery, and there are widespread reports of the use of white phosphorus by the IDF. Legal or not, these are not the kinds of weapons an army would use if its goal was to be precise. Israel has damaged or destroyed places of worship, medical facilities, government buildings, schools, and cemeteries. It attempted to justify its attack on a UN school that killed dozens of children by claiming that Hamas militants were firing from the school. But when that claim could not be shown to be true, Israel reverted to a claim that the fire was coming from nearby. If, as Israel has argued, Hamas militants dress up like doctors and teachers and hide in hospitals and schools to avoid fire, this would still not justify firing on such places, given the danger to civilians in doing so. Israel has taken refuge behind these shameful arguments to deflect attention from its killing of innocent people.
While Israel seeks to live in peace alongside a Palestinian state, Hamas seeks to kill or expel every Jew from the Middle East.
The third and most important argument is that Israel has a right to self-defense, and that is what it's doing here. Notice, please, that while every country has a right to self-defense, this does not mean that a country has the right to do anything it pleases in supposed support of that right. There is a moral and legal obligation to defend oneself at the smallest cost possible to others. Beyond that point, one is no longer engaging in mere self-defense. This is a hallmark tactic of U.S. policy in the Mideast, of course. Claim self-defense when in reality you are obliterating another country. But in this case, Israel is in fact not defending itself by any reasonable definition of the term. As Michael Newman points out, it is the Palestinians who are defending themselves against an enemy that has them surrounded, controls every air, land, and sea route around it, and which by its own admission is willfully depriving an entire captive population of what it needs to survive. As Newman rightly asserts, Israel can only claim self-defense after it withdraws from its illegal occupation, gives the Palestinians complete control of their borders, and allows the creation of a sovereign Palestinian state. Until this happens, there is no self-defense argument. There is no defense at all for this assault, or for any of the other 7 assaults by the IDF on Gaza in the last 5 years. There is only slaughter.